I'm not sure it's all about a shift to the right. And to be fair to the National Conservatives, I think they are trying to at least ask some fundamental questions about the state we're in and ways out of it. But the question I'd really ask is, as it were, does this stuff translate from American into Brit, as it were?
What did your survey find?
Well, we at Conservative Home rang around about roughly 25 Conservative MPs to find out if this much vaunted body, written about a lot in sections of the Tory press, was present on the ground. As I say, we asked about 25 of them whether this organisation is there, this organisation that is variously about making the Conservative Party more democratic and or campaigning to remake Boris Johnson leader of the Conservative Party and Prime Minister. We'll come to that in a minute. But what we basically found was, of the 25 or so MPs we asked, really not very many at all had got any evidence of its presence. So its presence in the media to date, or bits of the media, is really, as far as we can see, out of proportion with its strength on the ground now.
Now, Paul, I'm slightly guilty of this. I've interviewed them before, various people, David Campbell-Bannerman and others. Should we be doing that or not? Do they have any purchase at all amongst Conservative MPs? Or is this gang of people who say that they are just merely demanding the democratic will of party members without having any connection with party members?
I think we'll find out after the conference this weekend, because as I wrote this morning when writing up this very rough and ready kind of rule of thumb survey, it tells us something, which is that it doesn't seem to be very active at the moment, but it doesn't tell us everything. And it may be that our sample was wrong. We were, after all, only doing MPs. It may be more active in seats that don't have a Tory MP. And I think these conferences give activists and members a chance to meet and caucus and develop relationships and grow. So we'll see if anything comes out of it this weekend. But my point at the moment is, really, if you're looking for evidence that this is an organisation that represents anything much, it's not there at the moment.
And actually, if it was an organisation that was willing to put pressure on MPs, was representative of members, we might have seen a bit of that actually from MPs in the last week or so, in the hangover of the local elections, saying, Rishi Sunak's no good, he's got to go, it'd be better if we had Boris Johnson. And actually, we haven't seen, unusually for such a bad set of elections, we haven't seen any of that.
I don't think that reflects particularly on the strengths or weaknesses of the CDO. They have got some MPs going to their conference. I mean, Priti Patel, former Home Secretary, is going. Jacob Rees-Mogg, former Cabinet Minister, is going, and one or two others. And I think the situation with the local elections has got more to do with a certain sense of exhaustion. I mean, last year began with Boris Johnson as Prime Minister, then he went. Then we had Liz Truss, and she went. Really, Conservative MPs know at the moment that there isn't much alternative around to Rishi Sunak, and that sticking with the plan may not be the best idea in the world, but it's really the only realistic idea they've got after 5 terms. You can't suddenly, 4 terms, I'm sorry, you can't suddenly start reinventing yourself late in the day, approaching what you hope will be a 5th.
And actually, if we had another Prime Minister now, the 4th in 6 months would seem vaguely ridiculous. Now, Paul, I want to ask you about this other conference which is happening early next week. This the National Conservatism Conference, trying to replicate some of what the right has done in American politics, in British politics. Do you think they'll do any better at getting purchase?
It's my happy task to be across all these conferences and movements and to try to understand what they are. As you say, this is basically an American product, and it's an American response to globalization, cultural change, large-scale immigration, lots of stuff we're familiar with. And in America, really to try and boil it down to its essence, what it has is an idea that the previous conservative ideas of the George W. Bush era neoconservatism, the liberal order, all that's out of date. And what really matters now is nation states. So that's the origin of the idea, and it's coming here next week.
Do you think it will find an audience here? Is the answer to the Conservative Party's woes a shift to the right?
I'm not sure it's all about a shift to the right. And to be fair to the National Conservatives, I think they are trying to at least ask some fundamental questions about the state we're in and ways out of it. But the question I'd really ask is, as it were, does this stuff translate from American into Brit, as it were? So let me go to what seems to be the heart of their programme. I mean, I've looked at their statement of principles, and right in the middle of it is a statement that says in Christian majority countries, it says pretty plainly, we believe people should be drawing their inspiration from the Bible. Now, in America, that's one thing. You know, I think here in the UK, it's a bit of another, and you have to ask a number of questions. I mean, the first would be, are we a Christian majority country? Probably are, in the sense of people who would culturally identify with Christianity. But in terms of churchgoing's, you know, not a majority at all. It's a minority. And where in all this in the UK would there be space, say, for Islam? Which my sense is, and perhaps this is being unfair to the National Conservatives, or I'm just barking up the wrong tree, my sense is they've got reservations about it. So we might find more about that next week.
Paul, in terms of the sort of the state of the Conservative Party, you have a unique perspective on this, in that you became a Conservative MP in 2001, which even William Hague would not describe as the high point of the Conservative Party, and you left Parliament in 2010, just as they finally got back into government. So nobody could accuse you of being biased at this. How would you assess the Conservative Party's, I don't know, ability to turn things around and either win the next election, installing Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister next time, or depriving Keir Starmer of a majority?
In one sense, of course, the situation is appalling, and it's nationally very serious. What with the cost of living crisis and war in the Ukraine, and we're still feeling the after effects of the financial crash. And the Conservative Party has really kind of entertained us, if that's the right word, with 3 prime ministers last year. So from one point of view, it's really pretty bad. And my kind of top expectation at the moment, based on last week's local elections, of a Labour majority, if I had to guess, would be their top point would be a majority of about 45, somewhere there. But I think Rishi Sunak could just get a majority, because basically last week seemed to suggest to me 2 things in contradiction. One is tactical voting. Tactical voting is really helping Labour. They don't have to have as big a lead over the Conservatives as they might if anti-Tory voters are voting efficiently. But against that, you've got to weigh something that I gather is called electoral unwind. And what that means in plain English is that as you get nearer the election, the government usually recovers. Not always, but usually. And both these things, your tactical voting and your electoral unwind, they are real. They're happening now. On the tactical voting, we saw that last week. On the electoral unwind, that's already taken place. Sunak has, as it were, he's cut the lead that Labour had over the Conservatives when he came in by almost half. Now, you know, that could change and lots of things could happen one way or the other. But a way of thinking about this election is tactical voting going to do the Tories in, or is a kind of return to the government just about going to get them over the line?